Welcome to another episode in our CEO series here on L.E.A.R.N Invest. In this series, what we do is interview CEOs of companies to learn a little bit about them, a little bit about the company, and see if we can get any interesting, knowledge or gems about whether the industry they're a part of. If they are listed, maybe we'll learn a little bit about the company to see if it can help us make better investment decisions and just to really add to our knowledge and expertise as investors. So when we speak with these CEOs, what we're hoping to do is pick their brains, so to speak, to see if we can, take advantage of their expertise, their experience, and just to see, what interesting things they may be working on through their various companies. So today is going to be an interview with Christopher Burns from First Atlantic Commerce. I've been following Chris on LinkedIn for a little bit. They work on a lot of interesting things. So I was really, looking forward to this conversation. And so I know you're going to enjoy it. So let's just get started.
Learning is the key to successful investing. And who doesn't want to invest in some way?
Here at L.E.A.R.N Invest, we focus on financial education, all with the aim of sharing our knowledge on personal finance, investing, and building wealth. We do this on the foundation of our faith in God.
If a more holistic approach is what you need, check out our Grow Faith-based financial coaching program.
Find out more about us at learngrowinvestclub.com
and follow us on all social media platforms at Learn, Grow, Invest.
All right, welcome back. Please join me in welcoming Chris. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good, Saint Germain. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I know I had reached out months ago and we just had to get the scheduling right, but it's I think there's no time like the present, so thank you so much.
No, it's great. And it was good to actually see you in person at Tech Beach in December last year, I think it was as well. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity and great to be here.
Great, thank you so much. So before we get into what First Atlantic Commerce does, usually we like to understand a little bit about the person who we're speaking with. So tell us who is Chris and what was your path to being CEO of First Atlantic.
It's a big topic. So I'll try not to get too sort of existential about it. But so for me, I am CEO of First Atlantic Commerce and our sister company PowerTrans. I'm Bermudian. I've been back in Bermuda now for nearly 20 years, which I'm very thankful for. It's a beautiful place to be, and a really strong springboard for the type of work we do within the Caribbean and Central America. But if we take it back more years than I care to count right now, we're looking at, when I had graduated from university in England, I'd had a business management degree. I was always interested in IT and technology, not necessarily from a coding perspective, but from a business perspective and what technology could do in terms of changing the way that we do things. And I ended up, I think originally I was working at a IT headhunting company when I first graduated. My first job working with Silicon Valley startup companies that were broaching into Europe and EU and trying to find their CEO, their MD, their first salesperson on the ground. And it really gave me a pretty fantastic insight into technology, because I really had to do my research on each one of the companies that we were representing to really understand the technology, to try and attract the talent into them. So that sort of deepened my interest in technology. And I took that for 5 years, and it gave me a very thick skin as well. Recruitment companies are not necessarily everybody's favorite organization to deal with. So you're usually bottom of the callback list. And, back in those days, LinkedIn was barely a thing. Everybody just started using emails. So yeah, I'm dating myself a little bit there, but it's so it was a lot of phone calls, 50 phone calls a day, trying to hit numbers, very commission orientated type of job. And it taught me a lot about resilience, a lot about goal setting, a lot about having faith and not being scared to ask the questions and to really try and get in front of people, because a lot of people are scared sometimes to ask. And if you don't, ask the question, a lot of times opportunities really will pass you by. And so I'm very, very thankful for that background. And I still lean on it heavily every day. And it's something that
it seems like a very useful skill to have as CEO, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not very good at taking no for an answer, and that really comes from those early days,
Yeah.
and trying to be creative, because in those days of headhunting, you're really trying to map out organizations, and you sometimes have to be a little creative about why you need that person's email address or cell phone number, or what's your real intention of trying to get hold of these people. So yeah, it taught me a lot about creativity as well. So I'd had a good run at that. I was successful at that, and I was at that point moving, determined to move back to Bermuda. The English weather is famous for being particularly bad. And where I was up in Manchester, it's one of the worst places for the bad weather. So and I'm being Bermudian and from the island and loving, being in and around and under the water and everything to do with island life. I had enough, basically, and it was time to come back to my roots. And at that point, I interviewed with a lot of different companies, in different industries, insurance, telco, general software, and First Atlantic was the most interesting company to me at that time. Sort of 19 years ago, right? One of the first payment.
And I guess it's still interesting because you're still there, right?
It is. But I've had a really good journey through that too. So the company has afforded me a lot of opportunities to grow. I started as a salesperson within the organization, as a business development manager, and they have been good to me, and I progressed through the company, every 3 or 4 years into different positions. And 11 years ago now, I was offered the opportunity to take on the CEO job, and that is something that I've always been thankful for to the ownership, but also it's still something that gets me out of bed excited every day. Had you asked me 19 years ago if I'd still be working for the same company, I absolutely would have said no chance. You're crazy.
I completely understand that, because I've moved around a little bit, and I think I look at it as, so I see nothing wrong, for example, with either option, right? I did start my journey as an entrepreneur, so I thought I would always be working for myself. But then, when I decided to move into corporate, I found out that there are some roles where there's a ceiling. So I worked at, for example, Microsoft, and my role was there was no hire, right? It was technical account manager, there was a senior technical account manager, but that was it. I was interested in, kind of progressing. So I made a move, and then I started as, a technical sales role. Then I was able to go to country manager, but then, it was such a small company that it didn't really give me the kind of, experience I was looking for. And so I've moved on, quite a bit, I'd say, but to me, it's like, in my mind, it's my one career, right? I'm trying to build up and gain all of these skills that I think, are interesting for ultimately what I would want to do. So I think if you're able to spend that much time in the same company, it means then that you're able to still get the type of opportunities that maybe other persons would get by moving on to another company, which is a good thing. But I guess CEO is kind of that limit, right? Because you can't go any higher. But the fact that you're still there, it fortunately means that you are still able to grow in different ways, new territories, new boundaries for the company, and things of that nature. So I think if you're still there, it means then that there's something definitely good that's happening that makes you want to stay. So good stuff there.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
did you want to say anything else
No, I was just
regarding?
saying, and that's been the beauty of the company. It's constantly evolved. We've been breaking into new technologies, into new markets. The company has definitely has a different feel to it did
Yeah,
many years back, and that's what keeps it interesting. So I don't think now that even though FAC's been around for 23 years, I don't, it still feels a bit like a startup, a smaller company, where, I don't think I have a traditional CEO role as in a large corporate. We're still, I'm still very hands-on with a number of things that you maybe wouldn't be in a larger company. And I really enjoy that. Some people don't, they want to be able to fully delegate everything and have people report back to them. I would rather be more involved, not from a micromanagement perspective, but just understanding, what every department's going through and how we
yeah,
can do that better.
yeah. It just sounds like you're the right person in the right role, right? So that's good. So tell us about First Atlantic Commerce. Who is First Atlantic Commerce? What do you do? Um who are you serving, right? So who you are and who are you serving?
Sure. So First Atlantic Commerce, if we're going to, so label it completely, is a payment software company, specifically within the e-commerce realm. So if you are looking to accept credit or branded debit cards via your website, we are the technology that would integrate with the back end of your website, or payment button, or e-invoice, or shopping cart, whatever that might be. And we provide all the software and the rails to send that transaction out through the banking system, through the card associations, Visa or MasterCard or Amex, to the bank that card was issued from, and really see if they get an approval or a decline on that transaction. And then we send all that back through a secure manner, which is a massive industry. Until you get into it, you just go onto a website, pay, and you want your product as soon as possible. But once you get involved in it, you realize the scale of the networks that are involved, and the number of companies, and the amount of people, and the security layers that are involved in making that Amazon transaction happen. So you can get your next fix from a retail perspective. So it's a huge network, and you're constantly learning through it. So First Atlantic, is Bermuda-based company, right? So technically not Caribbean, but we feel like we're Caribbean. From that perspective, we're a small island nation, 60,000 people, 22 square miles in the middle of the Atlantic. It's a unique place, and we have grown from here, and our footprint was kind of all over the world for a while, even as far afield as Mauritius, and then now over the last 11 years, we've really honed that to focus specifically on the Caribbean and Central America, because we saw there were a lot of gaps similar to the issues we were having in Bermuda, trying to solve technology problems from a payments perspective. And the Caribbean and Central America were facing all the same issues. And rather than slug it out with large companies like PayPal and WorldNet and people like that, it just didn't make sense for us to do that. And we were never going to put boots on the ground in the US or Europe or wherever that might be. So I think at that point 11 years ago, we were connected to one bank in the Caribbean, which was Scotiabank. And fast forward 11 years, we're connected to 14 different banks, spanning 29 countries, with thousands and thousands of merchants on the platform. So, the strategy has panned out, but that's only because we were able to deliver on what we were promising, and we're not a US-based company that is, kind of in the Caribbean by accident.
That's very important.
Yeah.
Very important.
It is, and that's what we work really hard on, is to make sure that everybody understands that we treat this region first. It's not we're not here just because one of our big customers happens to have an operation in one Caribbean nation. So and I think that really makes a difference, and people are appreciative of that. in terms of what we do. So the main mission that we have now as a company is to provide the easiest integration points and process for merchants to be able to accept payments online. So whether that's directly integrating with our API or our hosted payment page or through any of our payment plugin partners, we are providing multiple methods that should make your life a lot easier to get into that industry. And we're heavily invested in the e-commerce industry within the Caribbean. We want that to succeed, not just because that helps our bottom line, but because we have been there for so long. We're emotionally invested in that as well, and I think people can see that with what we do and the things we participate in. So that is the FAC side. And then we recently launched a platform and a company called L.E.A.R.N, which is designed to solve for the semi-integrated payment solution issue at point of sale within the Caribbean. So as you'll know, when you go into a store, there's the cash register system and the point of sale software, and then those merchants have to go and rent a payment terminal from the bank, and those two systems are not integrated, which causes a whole host of issues in terms of manual entry and customer experience and reconciliation on accounts, because the data has to be manually entered from one system to another and then reconciled with actual receipts and then bank accounts on top of it. So we launched L.E.A.R.N to provide an integration point between the software and the payment terminal, so we can streamline all of that process. So that's a big part of what we're doing now as well, and as we go forward as a company.
Okay, great. So who would you say your target customer is? Is it simply just entrepreneurs and small businesses, anyone who wants to conduct any form of transaction?
Everyone. Any business, big or small, from that perspective, if they are looking to accept payments from an online perspective, we have a solution that would match their needs. So from the micro merchant that might just want to put a payment link on their Facebook post, or send a link through Messenger, or send just a simple email invoice with a payment link in it, so you can action that straight away, opposed to waiting 60-90 days for somebody to eventually send you cash or log into their online banking. Creates that instant action point to actually pay right then and there for your customer. Through to we have multi-billion-dollar NASDAQ listed companies on the platform as well. So we and governments on the platform. So Jamaica, for example, Jamaica government is all their online processing is done through us. So whether it's tax or
interesting, I never knew that.
Yep. And then we have a lot with other utilities companies. We work with companies like Flow and Digicel, TSTT, most of the major telcos within that perspective, both with FAC and L.E.A.R.N for the card present transactions. And then we have restaurants, hospitality, retail, hotel, airlines, like people like Bahamas Air, Cayman Airways. So it really ranges. We really don't want to be in a position to say no to anybody. From a technology perspective. And then we do all the heavy lifting on the back end with all the different banks. So people have a choice in terms of which bank they actually want to work with.
Okay, well, sounds good. So in terms of subs, you just shared who you're serving. Is it in terms of your products and services, is it seen as one thing for you, just payment processing, or do you break those down into maybe different products and services depending on who the client is?
Yes, so we definitely do that. So our larger clients will usually integrate with us through our API. So it's an interface that they can connect their website, because they've usually built their websites themselves. There's a lot of additional functionality within there, and they want to take control over that software interface. So for the larger clients, we'll usually use that. The smaller sort of small merchants will generally use some of the payment button features that we have, or payment links, or e-invoices for sure. And then as you build up from there, we have a lot of services around supporting shopping carts. So things like Wix, Magento, Shopify, WooCommerce. So we worked with regional partners to build plugins for those shopping carts that didn't exist before. So before, if you wanted a Wix, site, you can build it, and if you wanted to add a payment component to it, though, you would have to have like a U.S. company and U.S. bank accounts and have the funds sent there, which is obviously not what people want. So we, invested the time and energy to work with these partners to create those plugins for all those major shopping carts. So now the Caribbean is not excluded from using those to build their e-commerce businesses, because we have those links within there. And that tends to be like, the small to medium size type businesses. We worked with things where integrations into DHL, so you can have all that, direct integration with the API. So, we have lots of different services depending on the business size and where you want to be too. Some companies are just going to be in one country. Some companies are, like customers like Unicommer, for example, in multiple countries. And that, through a single interface into our platform, they can access all the different banks that we have on our back end of that. So the holy grail from a payment gateway perspective is to be connected to everything, every bank, every country, every payment method. Realistically, on a global scale, that's near impossible to do. But because we have a smaller market, in terms of the Caribbean and Central America, we have become that common gateway switch to the whole region. So companies can access all of that simply through a single interface.
Okay. So you mentioned some of the platforms or partners that you integrate with already. Are there any maybe top 2, top 3 platforms or partners that you work with that you think has really led to the growth of your business?
Yeah, certainly. So we have we have worked with companies like WePay and Figaro, and we see a lot of interest in WordPress. So that WooCommerce plugin, Shopify has been very popular. Wix is very quickly becoming one of the more popular solutions. It's very simple to use. Even I've used it. I built a website on it, and I'm not very technical at all, even though I run a technology company. Very simple, very intuitive to use. We've worked with a lot of great companies locally as well, like WebGold and Trinidad Site Factory. We have some really great partners locally, which we're really proud of, because we've run into this issue many times where this almost this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy within the region that because we don't have PayPal, we can't do this, or things like that. And I said, well, and I'm here to tell everybody that that's absolutely not the case. And we have thousands of examples of companies that have done incredibly well, either selling domestically or internationally, through solutions that are built in the region. PayPal is not the be all and end all of building an online business and accepting payments. In fact, PayPal themselves will tell you that they only get about 10% of the traffic on any given website that they're on. So it's just an additional tool, and it's not the determining factor if your business will be successful or not.
It's so interesting because we signed up for PayPal because at some point everybody creates a PayPal account, right?
Right.
So we created one for our L.E.A.R.N Grow Invest website, because we do provide some services through our website. So we were there, just kind of created the account, did some transactions, and then one day we just realized we couldn't access those funds. Turns out we need to do some form of authentication with them before we can get the funds. When I research this online, I'm seeing persons saying it's one person mentioned he's been waiting to get his funds for almost 6 months.
Yeah.
And that was scary to me. I mean, we've been in this issue for about a month now. They've asked us to send all our documentation, all of that stuff. but we can't access that money. And it was such a pain because, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't a large amount because, interestingly enough, though we had PayPal, a lot of our clients were still asking to pay by a bank transfer because they wanted to pay in JMD.
Right.
So, we ultimately decided to go with another option because it can't be just PayPal. And you're right, because all we heard about at the time was PayPal or Stripe, or that's pretty much those are the options that most people speak about. But when you dig a little deeper, when you're probably in the right circles, you'll hear about all the options that exist. And so now, I mean, we're trying to see how we can solve the problem of ensuring that we have that flexibility for customers who want to handle transactions, and it's going to be, predominantly Jamaican customers for now, but would ultimately want to be able to serve the region. So, I mean, it's good to know that there are options out there for that.
There are, for sure. And we work with just about every bank in Jamaica, for example. If you Jamaica dollars as an example, and many issues with PayPal, as you discussed. Stripe has come up a few times as well, but again, that's only a US dollar solution, right? So if you have customers that want to pay you in Jamaica dollars, the only way to do that is to work with the local bank and a gateway like ourselves that's connected into the local bank network. So we do that for thousands of customers within Jamaica itself. So and also if you're getting that US dollars in the US, then you've got to repatriate those funds. You get the wire fees that are associated with that, and then the FX fees that go with converting it back to local currency. So with the solutions that we've built out within the region, it's like for like. Go straight into your local bank account, and you don't have to wait for a third party to give it to you.
Agreed. And trust me, that's something that I know I'll be talking to a little bit more about, because we're trying to figure out an overall solution. Because my concern is now, when we try to make a push to scale our business, we're having to deal with all these payment issues. It slows business down, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So what I wanted to ask you next is, what's your view of the competitive landscape? So you've mentioned a few partners who, I guess, from some perspective, some persons may view as competitors. I'm not sure if you'd phrase it that way, but what's your view of the landscape, right? Like, so if somebody is looking at First Atlantic Commerce, you don't necessarily have to call any specific names, but what's your view of the landscape overall? And if you choose to share, then who would you be positioned against?
Yeah, sure. And I'm always I know some companies would love to be the only solution, and I'm not actually a big believer in that, because the competition is really what drives you to excel within the business. So we do get asked, compared to say, okay, well, why should I use you over WePay, or why should I use you over Figaro, for example? And my response is that, well, you in either option, you're still using our technology on the back end. So I don't mind. You can come into me directly. You can come into one of our partners, because we don't provide that front end interface, right? So something that website builder tool or that payment button itself, we're the back end technology layer from that perspective. So I'd say choose whatever option best fits your business, but ultimately we're going to get that transaction on the back end of it. But there are some other companies out there that are similar to ours in terms of they provide payment services. None of them are focused on the region per se, or are owned by a third party that has a particular bias to one particular card brand, for example. So I guess where we differentiate ourselves there is our neutrality, right? So our mission is to make sure that you can accept their transactions through any method, through any bank, through what is best for your business. So we don't have a bias either way there, and we're going to give you a completely unbiased opinion on which direction we think you should go in from that perspective. And the fact that, you know, the other thing that we work very hard on that I think sets us apart from any competition within the region is the customer service level. You know, and that's what we work on really, really hard here at FAC. You know, whether it's internally between ourselves and on our different teams, and or you know, to our end customer level. So, you know, we service banks directly, we service merchants directly. So, you know, and we're not in a, you know, we get asked this, well, you know, I know we're only a small company, but, you know, can you help us? And that doesn't matter to us. You know, it is, you know, we want to serve everybody. So, and I think that's what makes us different from competitive products out there. You know, is that you know, that agnostic approach to what, you know, the card types or the banking system, and the fact that we, you know, the number one thing that we work on outside securing the network is the customer service, for sure.
Great. All right, cool. So in terms of in the future for FAC, like what does that look like? Is it, are you planning to, so let's say that you get to a place where you're the leader for all the e-commerce transactions in the region. Would you start to then maybe look at maybe some of those territories that you're not in right now? Or I mean, what's your vision for maybe the next 5 to 10 years of this space here right now?
Yeah, so I think we're always going to be interested in emerging markets rather than mature markets. So, you know, we have a lot of the Caribbean covered right now. We have all of Central America covered off right now. So, you know, when we look at other markets in, say, maybe South America is interesting. Maybe not Brazil. It's a bit of a monster to tackle from a payments perspective, and there's a lot of requirements around it to be there. So probably not something like that, but some of the smaller South American countries, you know, certainly interest me. I think there's a lot of potential there, but also, you know, adding new products and services to the benefit of our existing customer base. So, you know, as we all know, it's much more cost effective to keep your customers than it is to try and attract new ones. So we're always working on new things in terms of technology platforms internally, anti-fraud tools. So we just did a huge upgrade for 3DS2 to support that for the region for online transactions. We have a really strong and deep partnership with a company called Count, which is an anti-fraud platform. It's one of the largest anti-fraud platforms in the world, and we're working at providing sort of portfolio level anti-fraud solutions for the region. So now that the Caribbean is, you know, the e-commerce has had a huge uptick, and so, you know, from a fraudster perspective, you know, that is, you know, they start to take notice now, and you know, we'll maybe target more sites within the region. So, you know, we've built this partnership to help protect, you know, the existing customer base, and we're doing a lot to roll that out to existing customers. So strategically, that's good for us as well. You know, to be able to bring new product sets and new lines of revenue into existing customers. But the PowerTrans platform, you know, is a very big part of our strategic direction. So, you know, we built that, we own it, it's our IP. You know, we are building in functionality that didn't exist before from an e-commerce perspective, but also the card present space. So there is a huge amount of opportunity within the card present, you know, transaction arena. You know, so physical retail stores, restaurants, hotels, to really improve that experience for not just the restaurants, but for the customers, for the card holders. And helping transition, you know, people away from a cash economy, right? And society where, you know, the Caribbean is, you know, it's really holding on. We're really holding on to cash. But, you know, I think it's on companies like ourselves to to give them reasons to move away from cash. So it's got to be, but it's got to be simple, and it's got to be intuitive. And we see, a lot of technology companies that are coming up with all these ideas, but they're not really solving the problem, right? And it's adding more friction into the transaction. So why am I going to switch from taking my card out of my wallet, which can happen in very quickly and tap on a device, to having to use a digital wallet? Or if you look at, what is it improving for me to do it? And I know there's a lot of talk around digital wallets, and it does have a lot of use cases as well, which and we support, a number of digital wallets in terms of loading funds into the wallet from an original card type transaction. But it's, and we see this explosion of wallets across the Caribbean, which is really interesting. But at some point there's going to have to be some interoperability between them, because otherwise it's like going into a store and having 8 point of sale terminals, for whichever bank, right? So you got to figure out like how we're all going to play together in the same sandbox, right? So I think that's really interesting. We're following obviously cryptocurrencies really closely. There is I'm not necessarily still convinced that it's a good method of payment from me to your business.
I think the ship has sailed on that one. I don't know. I think something fundamentally would need to change about how it's done. But I mean, we've seen a handful of countries try to adopt it on a large scale. Didn't end well. And we've seen, just even as an investment, it just becomes just so riddled with scams and fraud, and it's really undermining the value that it's providing by all of these noise that surrounds it. So
I agree.
but I think the ship has sailed on it being that anytime soon. I think it's just not. I think either there needs to be more control, which to some defeats the purpose of it, because it's supposed to be anti-regulation. But I think people don't really understand the benefit of regulation, if that makes sense. So,
ask anybody who lives in the Bahamas about the value of regulation, after the whole FTX piece. And Bermuda has a big play in the fintech space, and especially digital asset space. And there is licensing here, but to get that license from the Bermuda Monetary Authority is very difficult. And I think it's just more recently that people have come to appreciate that, after a number of the issues that have come to light recently. So that's when we just today had an announcement that Coinbase is setting up and just been approved here, which is a big win for us. But having known the people that are behind that process, they would have been put through a very vigorous process to get there. So
probably been working on it for years.
probably have. So and then stable coins have been thrown around quite a bit. I know Jamaica's has a sandbox for that. Bahamas has had the sand dollar for a long time, which is not really had a lot of traction over the time, and that's again because there's too much friction in the transaction, right? And things like Dcash in Eastern Caribbean, which has had a number of technology issues. So but I believe it's back up and running now. So I think but we're at such an early stage with this, right? It's kind of like the AOL days back when the internet was coming through. Like there's still a lot to come from this. Doesn't mean we should throw it all out. It's just we just got to be cautious of what we do with it.
Yeah, agreed. So in terms of so just to kind of bring back to, because I know we kind of went off a little bit on the crypto side there, but
Sure.
you're pretty much planning to grow through either adding different products and services, I guess, in a way to kind of upsell to existing clients, and looking at emerging markets is what you're saying, and just kind of continuing to strengthen those partnerships that you currently have.
Yeah, absolutely. And then bringing net new products into another aspect of processing, like the card present side. So that's not really our history, but that's, for example, we rolled out payment kiosks more recently, which is all card present transactions. So we did that for Flow all through the Caribbean. So you can go up into a physical kiosk and pay. So we developed the first sort of fully integrated payment kiosk that does EMV, chip and pin, contactless, and also supports the local debit network in Jamaica and Trinidad, for that matter. So the links and the Jets cards, so things like that, like not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but just making the process better.
Yeah. So you mentioned something that I wanted to kind of single out here. Solving the problem of getting people to move away from cash. Like,
yeah.
In a very, what's your take on that? Because I actually was on a panel last night and I spoke about the fact that I think a lot of the innovations that we're seeing now, my take on it is that it's really meant for the next generation, because our current generation is not going to, I think it's almost seen as a nice to have, but as you say, a lot of persons in our culture just love cash, right? And even with we've seen a lot of incidents since the start of the year in Jamaica about theft for large sums of cash. But I said that that happens, and nobody thinks about stop using cash the next day. But if it's on the digital side, if you hear about some sort of online scam, they'll be like, well, that's the reason not to use it. You know what I mean? So it's almost like, if something happens online, they use it as confirmation not to use online. But there are so many things, there are so many very clear and present risks with handling cash, and people just don't seem to want to move away from it, because there's this, I think, a sort of mindset and culture that it's there, I can hold it, I know how much I have, or at least I can look at an account and I can see, but I don't really trust that I can wake up tomorrow and it will be there. I think that's why lots of people check their accounts so much, because you just want to make sure that whatever you think is there is still there. So what do you see as the way to really get persons to truly embrace more of just online, digital, those type of things?
Well, you're absolutely right. It is a generational thing, and we're gonna have there is one aspect of it where you're just gonna have to wait for those generations to come through, which is the kind of the longer piece. We have this sort of stand in line culture in the Caribbean where people still with just general retail banking, right? So I see it every day. I pass one of the banks here and there's a line of people waiting to go into the bank.
And online banking has been a thing for many years now.
Yeah. Or they could use the ATM. I guarantee like half of them are probably depositing money, which they could use the ATM for.
Or changing a check or something like that.
Yeah. And there's a mistrust there. So, which is funny because the systems that count the money in the ATM are more accurate than a person. And then you get a physical receipt for that as well that you can use as proof that you have deposited those funds. So there's much more of an audit trail using the financial system, the online systems, digital systems, to be able to help you track what's happened to your money, but also help protect your money too. So if somebody steals your wallet and all you've got is cash in there, that cash is gone. You have no recourse for that unless some kind soul has found it and returned it to you with the cash in it, which rarely happens. So you have then, but if somebody steals your cards and then does a bunch of transactions with them, you have chargeback rights on those transactions. So you can get that money back. Same as from an online perspective. If somebody, compromises your card, I had that the other day. I got a phone call from the bank and said, somebody's buying flat screen TVs from Walmart in Georgia. Are you there? And I'm like, no, I'm not. But they blocked my card. I got all the money back.
Yeah.
And so that for me just gives you so much more protection. So it's having that educational conversation with people to get there. Obviously, some people you're just not going to reach. Same with anything, right? It could be, it's the same with politics or money or whatever it is. You're just not going to reach certain people. They're never going to change their opinion, and not worth you trying to do that really. It's the people on the edge, that you need to start convincing to go there. And it's also putting in place systems where a lot of people don't have a choice too, which sounds harsh, but
No, you're right, because I think if we continue to remove cash from the system, build systems from the ground up that are digital first, then more people would use that option. But if I can go to the ATM and withdraw cash, then I'm gonna do it. So I think sometimes, I mean, look at the last couple of years when we were told that we had to stay home, we started ordering online, we started having our meetings online. But now that we have the option to go back into the office, that's what we're doing. So I think sometimes you have to remove choice for persons to do what is simplest to do, if that makes sense. So it's not necessarily from a forceful perspective, and of course, I'm not saying we should do this in all instances. I'm just saying in this particular case, sometimes having the option means persons will choose maybe the route that is a little bit outdated but comfortable and safe and what they know.
Completely agree. Like, so one of my favorite quotes is a Henry Ford quote, where he said, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said the horse. And look how successful, obviously the Model T Ford was. So, from that perspective, and here as well, I've seen it with the bank here. They took the bold step where they removed all the tellers. Yeah. So no more tellers. You can't walk in and make a physical deposit outside an ATM or online. And of course, there was some noise about that to begin with, but people adapted very quickly. And I bet you
because choice was removed, and they said, okay, this is my option to do business with the bank. I'm going to work with it.
Yeah. And I've seen stories in Jamaica where somebody, they had an issue where customers, you could come in and pay by card, right, or by cash, and people were going to the ATM across the road to take out cash and go and pay with cash when they could have used that same card to pay.
Well, so here's the thing, Chris, and this is a running joke in Jamaica. There's always a card machine that's not working. So that's also a problem, right? So it's a running joke where on Twitter you'll see just every weekend somebody saying card machine not working again and so on. So it's a thing, right? So so I mean, but what I find, I don't think it happens everywhere, because for example, for us, my wife and I, we do maybe 99% of our transactions digitally, meaning we almost use exclusively our credit card because it's easier to track and we get cash back for using that card. Only maybe our housekeeper, gardener, who we've been trying to get to use a bank account ever since we've been working with them. We're like, if you had a bank account, I could just transfer it to you. Because sometimes they are providing the service. We have to go and get cash to pay them because they don't have a bank account, right? So, and everything else is just online banking for us.
I agree, and I mean, I actively avoid businesses that only take cash.
Exactly.
So there's opportunity lost. And the other thing with that as well is that from a retailer perspective, if you're only accepting cash, people only spend what they have in their wallet.
Exactly.
So if they're paying by card, they're paying what's available in their bank account, or if they have a credit card, is what's available.
Especially, as I was gonna say, if it's a credit card, then the limit is the limit. So,
and I'm addicted to collecting air miles. Right, I travel a lot. I want the air miles. I pay with my credit card, my AA credit card for everything because I want the miles. I want the status on the airline. I'm trying to make my journey time as comfortable as possible, and that all feeds into that. But I understand that there's still a level of distrust in the bank systems. The Caribbean has a really healthy, wide credit union network still, because of that maybe distrust of the traditional banking structure. So it's bringing maybe the credit unions along as well, within the
probably
technology.
right. Yeah.
So, but it's some of it. You gotta. It's it's the reason why I do things like this. For example, is to try and help people feel more comfortable about moving to the technology side, rather than the paper-based side, because it's a constant education.
Yes, agreed. So just closing out with two more questions really. Usually we ask our CEOs what books they're reading or what podcasts they're listening to, either or.
Yep.
So what's on your playlist or reading list?
So there's a couple of things there for me. So I'm very slowly getting my way through a book called Lifespan, by a guy called David Sinclair. So it's called Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. He's a tenured professor at Harvard, and it's a super interesting look on why we're aging and how technology is getting to a point, and science, where it's actually going to be reversing, like bringing that back. So you can almost get to, it's like, what was the age you felt best at, and being able to reset your biological clock, which is fascinating to me. But some of the science is beyond me, but it's a fascinating book. And then the next one I have is Masters of Scale, which is by Reid Hoffman, so founder of LinkedIn, and
interesting.
So it looks like it's going to be a great book. And then podcasts, I have a few that I listen to. I like Tim Ferriss quite a lot. There's some really fascinating interviews with global leaders, not necessarily any particular industry type, but really good to do. I like some of the Malcolm Gladwell ones, like Revisionist History is very good. And I have this guilty pleasure, which is Armchair Experts, which is one from this guy called Dax Shepard, who's a Hollywood actor originally. But really good. So yeah, I try and move around. I'm more of a podcast person these days than a physical book reader. It just fits my schedule better.
Okay, great. Sounds interesting. I'll definitely check those out. I try to kind of make notes of the books that are mentioned and kind of research them. If they look interesting, then I'll add them to my own playlist. I've been wanting us to do like a book review series on our channel, but there are so many things to do. We haven't started it yet, but what I'm hoping to do is compile all the books that our CEOs mention and maybe share that as a kind of book list that persons can check out at the start of the year or something. So that's, thank you for sharing those. We'll definitely check those out. And final question here is, so what would you work with a lot of companies that are trying to essentially build businesses, right? So one question, two parts. So in terms of what's the number one thing, or maybe the handful of things that companies should consider when they're looking for a payment solution, that's the first piece. And the second piece is, what would you encourage companies to focus on instead of maybe the amount of time it would take for them to kind of figure out the solution, if that makes sense. So what are maybe opportunities you see for them to improve?
So one of the number one things we always tell people is to, whether you're working with us or any other payment company, is to check the connectivity of the gateway, right? So, and that might sound obvious, but we've seen so many mistakes where where people have chosen a partner and then realize they don't connect to any banks in the Caribbean, for example.
Yeah.
And that is a really costly mistake, because that can delay your launch by months.
Yes.
And you're burning through cash and cycles, and your runway is getting shorter. So I think that is one of the number one things we always get people to think about. Not even just at the gateway level, but also at the, like, say, the shopping cart level, for example, as well. Like, if what you're choosing, what front end website system you're choosing, or having built for you, make sure that it can connect into something that's connected within the Caribbean, because that can be a really costly mistake. And then in terms of other advice in there, I think persistence is something that is just so vital. Certainly within the entrepreneurial space. I think some people make a mistake and think, I'm going to be an entrepreneur because I don't want to work for somebody else. That should absolutely not be the reason you get into that.
Yeah. I hear that too. I'm like, you're probably gonna work longer hours, deal with the same persons you're trying to avoid, and now you have to try to motivate yourself to keep working, because when you work a 9 to 5, the truth is, if you have an off day or an off few weeks, you still get paid. As an entrepreneur, if you have an off few weeks, you don't get paid.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And I guess the last thing I would say there is, is don't believe the naysayers. We have all the talent we need and all the technology we need within the region to run a successful online business. It's there. We see it every day.
Great. Thank you so much. So, Chris, is there anything that maybe you want to say to persons as we close out? I know you're on LinkedIn, so I'll definitely be putting that link in the description. I'll say, guys, Chris is very, very easy to reach out to. The first time I messaged you, I think you responded either the same day or next, and we've kind of been talking a little bit. Then we met at Tech Beach. Very, very easy person to talk to. Always available. I was like, are you? I mean, I don't know how you do it, but whenever I message you, you're always responding same day, which is good to see.
That's a big mantra for me personally, and also for us as a company, right? There's, we don't operate in this thing where it's just a black hole where your messages go into and you don't get in there. I've had the same cell number for 20 years, basically,
Same.
which everybody gets, right? So it doesn't matter if you're a micro merchant or if you're one of our largest customers. Everybody has it. I had somebody, actually, to that point, I had somebody stop me at Tech Beach and say, look, you're not going to remember me, but I remember you because I called you. I was having an issue. You were in the gym. You stopped to take my call and help me out of the situation. And actually, I do remember the situation. But that's just the way we want to operate our business. We don't want to be one of these companies where people think we don't care. So, and I can tell you, like, if you're going to leave some advice for people, the customer service is going to make or break your business. And that's why, I work incredibly hard at responding to everybody, and doing so in a timely manner, because we want people to have that journey, that experience with us.
Great. Agreed. Thank you so much, Chris. This was a very interesting conversation. I do see where I may want to pick your brain another time on just some other aspects of the space. We'll probably be inviting you to join us again to speak about a very specific topic, because I think so. We have a growing entrepreneur community. I think a lot of them would benefit from just understanding the space of how to essentially manage that side of their business, right? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't focus on the business, right? You try to do maybe other things that don't necessarily feed into what you should be doing. But I'm not going to get into it now, but I'll reach out to you and talk about it. And I think that you have a lot of knowledge that we're going to try to kind of extract in different forums and see if we can maybe help our community members out.
Fantastic. I look forward to it. Count me in.
Great. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. Guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. If you have any questions for Chris, be sure to leave them in the comments below. I'm going to leave his contact for you to reach out to him on LinkedIn. As I mentioned, very, very easy and approachable guy, Chris. So if you need any help or support, be sure to reach out to him. We're going to try to link as well the books that were mentioned, just in case you're interested in checking those out. So thank you for watching this. I hope to see you in the very next episode.
Learning is the key to successful investing. And who doesn't want to invest in some way?
Here at L.E.A.R.N. Grow Invest, we focus on financial education, all with the aim of sharing our knowledge on personal finance, investing, and building wealth. We do this on the foundation of our faith in God.
If a more holistic approach is what you need, check out our Grow Faith-based financial coaching program.
Find out more about us at learngrowinvestclub.com
and follow us on all social media platforms at Learn, Grow, Invest.